Okay, this is absolutely wild, but shocking footage of an 80-year-old nun wheeling a suitcase that contained the remains of a fellow nun has been released. Just last week, police responded to a report that a suitcase full of human bones had been found on the street. Initially believed to be cartel-related, the investigators were shocked to see this 80-year-old nun wheeling the dumped suitcase on nearby CCTV footage. The nun in that footage has been identified as Lorenza Ramirez, and then the remains found have been identified as 58-year-old Erica Fernandez, a fellow privately bound nun. Lorenza claims that Erica passed away last year from natural causes and that the two had a pact to not report it if the other one passed away. And I'm not saying she's lying, I'm just saying that that's pretty weird. As of right now, Lorenza hasn't been charged with anything, but she does face potential fines for, dumping remains on the street. I've seen conflicting reports whether or not an investigation is still ongoing or not. I did see somewhere that they said that there's no signs of foul play, but considering only bones have been found, it would be hard to determine that. But I'll keep you guys updated. So in the meantime, make sure to leave all your thoughts, theories, questions, and case suggestions in the comments.
She took the life of her boyfriend because he broke up with her over text message. In 2014, James and Melanie met over a gaming app. They both loved games and were more on the shy/awkward side. The two formed an instant connection and started dating. Melanie spent many days and nights at James's home, including Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. James saw a side of Melanie that many others didn't notice. He noticed that she was possessive, controlling, and expected him to spend every waking moment with her. Melanie hated his friends, including his best friend Jeff, and often threatened James. The two ended up ending things together, but Melanie convinced him to get back together with her. James quickly realized that this was a mistake and tried to end things with her once again, but she would not have it. On November 16th of 2016, James's mother made a frantic phone call to police that someone had stabbed her son. James was bleeding profusely from multiple stab wounds from his chest and from his body. Once paramedics arrived, they tried to save James, but once he was transported to the hospital, he ended up passing away. The prior evening, James's best friend Jeff had spent the night at his home, and around 3 a.m. he was woken up by James pleading for help. James's mom heard the commotion, and her boyfriend called 911. Once police arrived, they found a 10-inch curved steak knife sitting on the kitchen counter. No one in the home heard an intruder come in, but police found a pink cell phone that belonged to James's girlfriend Melanie. James's mom told police that James's girlfriend Melanie was sweet, kind, and caring, and she would never try to hurt her son. Once Melanie's mom heard about the stabbing, she rushed over to James's home and told police that the last time she saw her daughter was when she rushed away in her car. Meanwhile, James's father spoke with police and told them that he had communicated with his son before earlier in the day and that he had plans to break up with his girlfriend Melanie. Detectives were looking through Melanie and James's text messages, and it confirmed that James had broke up with Melanie over text. Authorities were able to track down Melanie, and she was staying with relatives, and she confessed to James's murder. Melanie told detectives that James had broke up with her over the gaming app where they had first met and that she was extremely hurt. Apparently, James had told her that he had not loved her for months, and that's when she grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed him. Police then took Melanie into custody on a second-degree murder charge. Melanie was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison.
The real-life Gone Girl who faked her own kidnapping for 6 years. Sherry Papini, beautiful, born and raised Cali girl, wife, and mother. Life seemed pretty good for Sherry. Until back in 2016 when Sherry's husband Keith returned home from work to find his wife missing. I cannot stress enough how concerned the world was when Sherry disappeared. So much media coverage, tens of thousands of dollars donated and spent on resources to find her. Then 22 days later, Sherry popped back up in terrible condition. Found on the side of the highway shortly after 4 a.m., Sherry was bloody and bruised and branded and chained up and starved, just in terrible condition. With a crazy story about being abducted by 2 Hispanic women who tortured her for 22 days until one of them just let her go. From the start, people were skeptical about Sherry's story. Something just seemed off. At the same time, Sherry's injuries were extensive. Why would someone do that to themselves? Well, in March of 2022, 6 years after she claimed to be kidnapped, Sherry was arrested by the FBI for faking the entire thing. She was staying at an ex-boyfriend's house the entire time and inflicted all the injuries herself or with his help. For attention or money, honestly, I have no clue. Sherry ended up only serving a couple months in prison as part of a plea deal where she would have to pay back the hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen in donations and resources, money she still has not paid back in 2024. I think one of the saddest parts of this case is all the money and resources that were spent and wasted looking for Sherry that could have been used for someone who was actually missing. Well, after it came out that his wife had hoaxed her own kidnapping, Keith ended up divorcing Sherry, so at least he got a better ending than Nick got in Gone Girl.
His mom took his life because of his sexuality. 17-year-old Itaberly Lozano lived with his mother Tatiana, stepfather, and younger sibling in Brazil. From photos, it seemed like they were a happy family, but it was far from that. When Itaberly came out to his mom saying that he was gay, their relationship deteriorated. She was not going to accept that, and she wanted nothing to do with him. Because of this, it resulted in her beating him, and she would tell guys from their neighborhood that if they were ever to see him, to beat him as well. This would cause endless fights with his mom, so Itaberly just decided to just live with his grandmother for a bit. On December 29th of 2016, Itaberly received a phone call from his mom Tatiana that she wanted him to go over so that they could talk in person and reconcile. He was very happy about this because he loved his mother so much and he was hoping things would just turn around, but he was wrong. When Itaberly arrived at her home, he was greeted by two men, Victor and Millard da Silva. They were hitmen hired by Tatiana so that they could teach her son a lesson. These men beat Itaberly but refused to unalive him, so Tatiana grabbed a kitchen knife and just did it herself. Tatiana and her husband took Itaberly's body to a cane field and lit it on fire. His body was found about a week later and forensic investigation was needed in order to identify his body. When Tatiana was brought in for questioning, she stated that it wasn't because she was homophobic, it was because Itaberly would bring home men, he would do substances, and he had even tried to unalive her. The two men were sentenced to 21 years and 8 months in prison, and Tatiana was sentenced to 25 years and 8 months.
He took pictures of himself eating feces from a dirty nappy while wearing makeup and women's lingerie. His son would disappear after discovering the photos. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Dylan Redwine. Just a quick heads up before we get into the case, I have recently uploaded a brand new episode on my True Crime podcast titled True Crime with Caitlin. You can stream on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, all of those places. Find them all in the link in my bio. Dylan Nicholas Redwine was born in 1999 from his parents Elaine and Mark Redwine. He was described as a very typical young boy who enjoyed baseball, gaming, his mobile phone, hanging out with his friends and his older brother, and all round he was just described as a joy to be with. Elaine and Mark had been married for 18 years and there was abuse within this marriage. In 2012, they put in for divorce and this divorce would be a messy one, including a custody battle for 13-year-old Dylan, who he himself told a judge that he did not want to go and live with his dad. On the 18th of November 2012, Elaine drove a very upset Dylan to the airport. He was going to be jumping on a flight to spend Thanksgiving with his dad, which is something that he did not want to do. The relationship between the father and son was strained at best. Mark was a violent man and Dylan could see all the hurt and all the harm that he was causing his beloved mother. Unfortunately, despite how adamant Dylan was that he did not want to go, this was a court-ordered visit and there was nothing that Elaine could do, and if he didn't go, she could potentially have been arrested. Mark would collect Dylan from the airport. They would go to a Walmart together and then a McDonald's. During the drive back to the cabin, Dylan would ask his dad if he could have a sleepover at his friend's house that evening, desperately doing anything that he could to not spend the night at his dad's, but Mark said no. Dylan arranged with one of his friends to meet the very next morning at the crack of dawn, 6:30 a.m, but Dylan Redwine would never show. Mark alleged that the following morning, now the 19th of November, he woke up at around about 7 a.m and left the cabin to run a couple of errands, returning at 11 a.m to find that Dylan was gone. He didn't worry initially because he just thought that Dylan had gone out to meet meet that friend. However, as the hours went by and Dylan wasn't returning any phone calls or any text messages, a young boy who was known to always have his phone in his hand, Mark, did begin to worry. He went round to all of Dylan's friends' houses to see if he was there, and when he wasn't, Mark contacted the police. He would also text Elaine, who was over 300 miles away, to see if she had heard anything from Dylan, and she would later say that from the very moment that she received that text message, she knew that something was wrong and she knew that Mark was involved. Immediately, Elaine, her husband, and Dylan's older brother Corey all jumped into the car and made the over 5-hour journey from Colorado Springs to La Plata County, which again is over 300 miles. I always forget just how big some of the American states are, so to put that into perspective, there is just over 300 miles between London and Edinburgh. When they arrived, Elaine went straight to the police and got stuck in with the search. She is doing this after making the very long journey, and it's almost 1 a.m. However, Mark, who was the parent who had responsibility over Dylan when Dylan went missing, was sat in his cabin with the lights off, making no effort to engage in the search at all. For the next few weeks, police, search and rescue, and volunteers all scoured the dense woodland and mountainous area surrounding Mark's cabin. Divers went into lakes, sonar equipment was used, volunteers were canvassing the area, and the family even took to social media, doing everything that they could to get Dylan's name and face out there, hoping that it would generate some useful leads. However, despite all of that, paired with a $50,000 reward for information, nothing came of any of the searches. Suspicion quickly fell on Mark, who wasn't reacting how anyone would expect the father of a missing young boy to react. He barely participated in the searches. Blood that was found inside of his living room was a positive match to Dylan, and a cadaver dog signaled to smelling human remains in the living room and in the back of Mark's truck. 7 months later, in June 2013, police who had just begun another search for Dylan would discover partial human remains, later confirmed to be those of Dylan Redwine. These were discovered only 8 miles away from Mark's cabin. Because of the decomposition and the fact that this wasn't a full skeleton, the medical examiner wasn't able to determine a cause or manner of death, and years would pass before there was any more movement on the case. In 2015, more human remains would be discovered, and this included the skull of Dylan Redwine, showing that he had been decapitated. When his skull was examined, it showed signs of blunt force trauma, showing that Dylan had been murdered. Police turned to their only or main person of interest, and that was Mark Redwine, who offered up several theories about what could have happened to Dylan, but none of them included him. He said things such as maybe Dylan was kidnapped, or maybe Dylan was shot by a hunter, all of it being barefaced lies. On the 22nd of July 2017, almost 5 years after the murder and disappearance of Dylan, Mark Redwine would be arrested under suspicion of murder. His trial was actually delayed around about 10 times, so it took years for him to get in the courtroom, but when he did, he denied everything. It would come out that about a year before Dylan's murder, Dylan, his older brother Corey, and then Mark were all out on a road trip together. The two boys are sat with Mark's laptop and they're just kind of scrolling through the photos, looking at them, when they came across these disturbing pictures. I can't even post all of them because they are just that disturbing. These show Mark eating what appears to be feces out of a dirty nappy while wearing lingerie and wearing makeup. Photos that Mark wanted no one to see. Corey would later confront his dad about these photos, and it was said that Mark was absolutely furious and the two got into an explosive argument. The prosecution believed that Mark had murdered Dylan after Dylan had confronted him about the photos as well, that when Dylan confronted him, Mark flew into a fit of rage and murdered his innocent 13-year-old son, murdering him in in the living room and decapitating him with a knife and hiding his remains in the nearby mountainous areas that weren't easily accessible. Mark's ex-wife actually testified during the trial, and she said that one time Mark had told her if he ever had to get rid of a dead body, he would hide it in the mountains. Mark Redwine would be found guilty of all charges, including the second-degree murder of Dylan Redwine and child abuse resulting in death. He was handed a sentence of 48 years to.
This is Ralph Hendry and Kathy Brandel, a married couple of 27 years. The couple had been living on their yacht named Simplicity since 2013 after retiring and selling their house in Falls Church, Virginia. Ralph and Kathy were spending the winter sailing the eastern part of the Caribbean when their boat was found abandoned on February 21st near the island of St. Vincent. Another boater stumbled across the boat, and when they started looking around, they found evidence of severe violence and contacted the Coast Guard and the police. When authorities entered the boat, they discovered that it was completely ransacked. Items were strewn all over the deck and cabin, and a substantial amount of blood was found on the boat, leaving behind chilling evidence of a violent struggle. The only thing that authorities did not find were Ralph and Kathy. During the initial investigation, police found that the couple were last seen alive on February 18th by their boating neighbors at a dock at the Grand Anse Beach in Grenada, which is a popular tourist destination. When the neighbors woke up the next day, the couple and their boat were gone. Authorities were then notified that on that same day, which was February 19th, these 3 men escaped from the St. George police station nearby. They're officially identified as 19-year-old Traven Robertson, 25-year-old Abita Stanislaus, and 30-year-old Ron Mitchell. They were initially being held for various charges, which included rape and robbery, and they left behind a violent crime spree before being arrested. According to the Grenadines police force, after the 3 men escaped, they then violently hijacked Kathy and Ralph's boat, kidnapped them, and then presumably killed them based on the evidence found on their yacht. The prisoners are then believed to have thrown the couple's bodies overboard while they sailed to St. Vincent, which is where the boat was ultimately found. As of today, March 7th, Kathy and Ralph's bodies have still not been found, but police do believe that they are likely dead and are currently searching for them by air and sea between the islands of Grenada and St. Vincent. As for the escaped prisoners, all 3 were captured on February 21st after a large manhunt, and they've all reportedly confessed in some way to killing the couple. They're all currently being held, although at the moment, none of them have been charged with crimes against Kathy or Ralph, and how exactly the men escaped in the first place is still under investigation. Kathy and Ralph were experienced sailors who were part of a boating group called Salty Dog Sailing Association, and sadly, the day their boat was found was Kathy's birthday. She would have turned 71. Although the couple have a low probability of being found according to the police, they're still holding out hope that they're out there alive somewhere.
She was trying to be nice. She made friends with a lonely stranger only to be killed by him in the most brutal way. It was 2005 and Karen Diwa was a 16-year-old girl from Fife. She was a talented dancer and was a really likable girl. She was really family oriented and actually spent loads of her free time with her elderly nan, just looking after her. And that really summed her up as a person. She was super selfless and just wanted to do things for other people. Now, a teenage boy called Colin Evans from Wales had just moved in across the road from her. And like I said, she really was caring. She wanted to make sure everybody was okay. So when she saw that he had just moved in, she felt like she needed to check in on him and befriend him. Honestly, at the time, he seemed pretty harmless and seemed quite vulnerable, actually. So she had no qualms with doing this. But she had no idea what he was capable of and what had originally made him have to move in the first place. Colin had been accused over the years of just multiple absolutely disgusting things. There was at least 14 separate disturbing offences that he'd been looked into for. And this had been going on since he was just 10 years old. One woman reported him for 40 incidents of stalking and harassing her little son. On one occasion, he'd apparently even tried to lure a little boy out of school by forging a note for him. And on one occasion, a mum reported that he grabbed her little boy on his way to buy a pint of milk, put his hands round his throat, and told him to take his trousers down. Obviously, that's just so disturbing, and thank God the little boy actually managed to wriggle free and run off. Now, another woman reported to police that Colin would actually just stand naked in his window looking into children's bedrooms. But when she reported this, guess what police said? They were like, oh, he's fine to do what he wants in his own house. But does that also include killing a child? Because that's what he goes on to do next. He ended up getting made homeless and getting placed in a homeless shelter in Fife, but he was really not put off. Like, this didn't change his ways at all. He carried on stalking and harassing local children. And frustratingly, it kind of felt like he just slipped through the net because he was like moved around and he was just free to carry on doing like sickening, disgusting things. Karen and her friends, having no idea of any of this, obviously, like I said, befriended him, and they used to go round to his flat and just hang out with him. He was living alone in temporary accommodation, and like I said, he seemed sad, he seemed vulnerable, he seemed like he needed friends. But months down the line, Karen and her friends said that they had started finding his company not enjoyable. This was in the lead up to Karen's murder. I think he was getting less and less friendly, he was moody, he was irritable, and they just stopped enjoying hanging out with him. Then on the 20th of January 2005, things turned incredibly dark. An argument broke out between Karen and Colin that escalated to them calling each other names. Then, in just one of the most brutal attacks I've ever heard of, Colin lunged at her. He beat her and he strangled her and pushed her against a table. He grabbed a knife, he was cutting at her neck and then her hair. And if you're wondering why he was cutting her hair, he would later admit that the hair was getting in the way of him trying to cut her head off. He dragged her body down the stairs and submerged it into a bath full of water. He then stuffed what was left of her body into a bin and set it on fire. Now, obviously totally unaware of the absolute horrors that their daughter had gone through, Karen's parents became sick with worry when she didn't come home. They actually reported this to police and they said that Colin was somebody that she had been hanging out with and that she'd become scared for her safety. She'd apparently even contacted police the day that she died to report Colin. It was the next day when police searched Colin's temporary accommodation that they just found an absolute bloodbath. Her hair and blood was everywhere. Karen's charred remains were finally found. First, Colin denied having anything to do with this murder. He claimed that he loved Karen and he would never do anything like that. But he was soon backed into a corner. I mean, he lived there on his own. Finally, he did admit to the murder and confess to everything. He smirked through his whole court case and was given life with a minimum of 17 years. And I do believe that he has applied for parole, but has had this denied several times.
She travelled almost 3,000 miles to meet her online boyfriend, and he would kill her to harvest her organs before posting with them on TikTok. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Blanca Arellano. 51-year-old Blanca was a single woman living in Mexico City, Mexico. She was described as a beautiful, kind, warm woman who was intelligent, loving, and full of light. Blanca was really into online gaming, and it was through an online gaming platform that she became introduced to Juan Villaferte. Juan was a 37-year-old medical and biotechnology student living in Lima, Peru. Blanca and Juan connected, and they began to speak constantly. They shared stories about each other's lives, about their hopes and dreams and ambitions, and they really connected on an emotional level. The two would begin a long-distance online relationship, and in 2022, they decided that it was time to finally meet in person. Blanca would make the almost 3,000-mile journey from Mexico to Peru, following her heart, going to meet a man that she had spoke to non-stop for months, a man that she thought she knew. Over the next few weeks, things seemingly went great between the couple. Blanca would talk to her niece Carla, who she was very close to, and she was telling Carla just how great Juan was, that him in person was just as amazing as he was online, how much fun they were having together, and that she thought she was in love with him. Absolutely nothing to foreshadow the horror that lay ahead. In the second week of November 2022, Carla, who again is Blanca's niece, began to worry. She hadn't heard from Blanca into what was coming up to be a week, which was very strange. Throughout her entire trip to Peru, she would check in pretty much daily, even if it was just to say hi. So when it was coming up to a week, week and she hadn't reached out and she hadn't responded to anyone within the family, they really began to worry. Carla would report Blanca missing to the Peruvian police, and she would actually take to Twitter, where she posted a tweet thread, desperately hoping that someone will be able to help find her beloved auntie, who she described as, quote, one of the most loved and important people in my life. Carla would also reach out to the only person that Blanca knew in Peru, the very reason that she was over there, and that was Juan. When confronted, Juan told Carla that he and Blanca had actually broken up. Blanca was bored of him and he couldn't provide the life that she wanted. And so a couple of days earlier, she left. He thought that she was heading back to Mexico and he hadn't seen or heard from her since. Only days into their search for Blanca, Peruvian police would make a devastating discovery. Found nearby a beach in the Huacho area, they discovered a severed finger. This finger had had the fingertips removed, so they weren't able to identify who this belonged to. However, a silver ring that was still sat on the finger was undoubtedly Blanca's. Over the next couple of days, more dismembered body parts, all of which were confirmed to belong to Blanca, would wash up or be discovered nearby the beach. This included her head, her face had been removed, an arm and a dismembered torso minus any of the internal organs. So the intestines, the heart, the lungs, all of it had been removed. What Peruvian police found very interesting about this was the incisions and the wounds. The incisions were done at a very professional level, someone who knew what they were doing and someone who had knowledge about anatomy. This wasn't the work of someone who didn't know what they were doing and just hacked at the limbs as they dismembered them. They would turn to their main and only person of interest, Juan Villaferte, arresting him under suspicion of human organ trafficking. He completely denied any sort of involvement in Blanca's murder. He tried to even distance himself away from her. He claimed that he didn't even really know her and that she was just this homeless woman who he would help out. Of course, all of that being complete utter lies. A search of his home would uncover blood spatter all across his walls, in his bathroom and on his mattress. They would also discover some of Blanca's clothes along with a Mexican flag. It was reported that in the days following Blanca's disappearance, Juan was posting educational videos to TikTok. These videos showed him dissecting real human organs. One of the videos showing him dissecting a brain. He would be found guilty of the murder of Blanca Arellano and was handed a sentence of 35 years to serve.
This is the story of Jacqueline Williams and Fidel Coffey. The year is 1995, and this couple right here, Jacqueline and Fidel, desperately wanted a child, but they was unable to conceive. So Jacqueline decided to fake her pregnancy. She not only faked her pregnancy, she lined her pregnancy up to match her friend, Deborah Evans, who was really pregnant at the time. Deborah was pregnant by Jacqueline's cousin, Laverne Ward. Now, Deborah and Laverne was not on the best of terms. Even though she was pregnant, she had a restraining order out on Laverne for domestic abuse, and she also had a new boyfriend who she was also living with at the time. On November 16th, 1995, Laverne, Jacqueline, and Fidel entered Deborah's apartment while her boyfriend was at work. She was startled to see all three, but she let them in anyway. Jacqueline then pulled out her gun and shot Deborah in the head. Now, the bullet hit at a funny angle, so she didn't die instantly. Fidel and Laverne stabbed her 10-year-old daughter, Samantha, to death. They then got a pair of scissors from the kitchen and began to cut the unborn baby out of Deborah's belly. They seen that she was still alive, so they stabbed her in the neck. Took the newborn baby, washed him out in the sink, took the young boy, Joshua, right there, who was 7 years old, and they went to a friend's house. They left 2-year-old Jordan there with his deceased mother. Deborah's boyfriend came home to this gruesome scene, and he automatically thought Laverne did it because his child, the 2-year-old Jordan, was unharmed. Now, y'all remember they took 7-year-old Joshua. They end up slitting his throat driving like 10 miles and dumping him in a random alley. So the baby survived. Jacqueline is happy. She thought her fake pregnancy paid off. She's showing her family, her friends. She even named the baby Elijah. But all this doesn't even last a full week, because once they caught Laverne told it all. He said that Jacqueline wanted a baby and he knew where he could get one from. He was mad at Deborah, and that was his way of getting Deborah back. When the police arrested Jacqueline, she had baby Elijah in her arms. She told the police that the baby was very healthy and well fed. It came out that Jacqueline was excessively eating to gain weight so nobody would question her. Once she got bigger, she would wear fake bellies to make her look pregnant, to keep up with her friend's Deborah pregnancy. Jacqueline and Fidel was sentenced to death, while Laverne Ward got a life sentence. This is baby Elijah in 2006. He is a healthy boy, and he does know about his traumatic entrance in this world. This was a crazy one, y'all. What y'all think?
I mean, it had to be an exorcism gone wrong. She had 67 rituals done to her because everyone thought she was possessed by Lucifer and Hitler. And Elise Michelle was 23 when she died, and she weighed 66 pounds. That's how much a 12-year-old should weigh. Her family was so sure that she was being possessed by 6 demons that within a 10-month period, she went through 67 rituals, and by the end of it, she looked like this. 100 pounds less than her normal weight from kneeling and praying so often during the rituals, she couldn't even move without assistance. At what point does somebody become so sure that she was possessed? When Annalise was 16 years old, she suffered a severe seizure and was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. But even with all of the intense medications that Annalise took, she never got better. In fact, she would tell her friends and family that she would see devil faces, would hallucinate during prayers, and heard voices telling her that she was going to rot in hell. And it's been 5 years of constant medical attention and drugs being literally shoved down her throat, and she was just done with it. She got so depressed and actually became intolerant to sacred Christian objects like a church or a crucifix. Apparently, she refused to walk past any crucifix, walk past any church, or even drink holy water. There were multiple situations where she would growl, she would speak different languages that her parents didn't know, and even at one point that her eyes turned black while staring at a crucifix that her mom shook her out of. It got to the point where she'd pee on the floor, lick it up, and also try eating bugs. This is when her parents knew that it was time to cut the medical attention and seek God. Her mom had went through several priests and churches trying to seek help, and none of them helped her until 2 men right here agreed. Annalise would go through an exorcism once or twice a week for 10 months straight. Would be deprived of food and water, thinking, okay, maybe if I'm weak enough, the demons will leave. They would name her cause of death as neglectful homicide, and her parents, along with the 2 priests right here that performed the exorcisms, went to jail for 6 months, but then they reduced it to 3 years of probation. If she'd been taken to the hospital 1 week before she died, she could have survived and spent 1 more day fighting those demons.
This is the story of Dana James Yule. Easter Sunday, 1992. James was away at his girlfriend's house, 200 miles from his hometown, Fresno, when he got a call from the police telling him not only his parents, but his sister were killed. Now, Dana's actions surprised the police because he didn't seem surprised that his parents and his sister was dead. Nevertheless, the 21-year-old was on the first flight back to Fresno to meet with the detective. The detectives decided to take Dana to the crime scene to see his reaction in person, to see if it was the same as how he gave on the phone. And it most definitely was. The detective stated that he was walking over pools of blood like it was water. No reaction at all, that his family was killed here. Now, this was a high-profile case because Dana's dad, Dale Yule, was in aviation. He actually sold airplanes, which made him millions. The family was worth $8 million to be exact. But the family was very modest. They didn't live like millionaires, and they was okay with that. They didn't feel the need to. They were comfortable, and that's all that matters. All of them except Dana. Dana was money hungry. He wanted badly to be successful like his father. But Dana didn't want to take the time to put in the work. After his family was murdered, he almost immediately started to ask about his trust, which he got hit with a bombshell. He did not know his father, Dale Yule, changed the trust fund. He could not get any money until he was 30. And oh, was Dana angry. So angry that he hit the table. And that made them look like, he's really mad. He haven't even buried his family yet, and he's asking about money. He was so angry, he bought his family the cheapest casket. Then when asked to put flowers on their grave, he said, why? They're not there. Police grew so suspicious that they decided to go to Dana's college just to talk to a few of his friends to get more information. And they were told that Dana's best friend, Joel, had just abruptly dropped out of college with no reasoning. So the police said, Come to find out, Joel had actually dropped out of school to move with Dana just weeks after the family's murder. 3 years go by with little to no evidence. Detectives had tapped Dana's phone. They had him under surveillance for several months, but still nothing until forensic had decided to look deeper and seen that the shell casing was from a specialty high-powered rifle, which was kind of hard to get. But y'all know it's not hard to see who purchased it. And it was this man right here, Jack Ponce, who was a friend of Joel. The detectives took him in for questioning, and it didn't take long for him to crack. After he found out that he could be charged for accessory, Jack started singing like a canary. He said Joel and Dana offered him a cut of the $8 million if he got them a weapon. He also told the detectives that Joel completed the act all by himself. Dana gave him the key, told him to go in the house and wait, and that's exactly what he did, hoping that he'd get a piece of the money because Joel came from hard times, so a promise of a cut of $8 million was all he needed. Dana told him to go in the house and wait until the family came home. He told them what time they will be home and that he will page them when they were on their way home. The two women entered the house first. He shot the sister in the back of the head. The mother tried to run, but she didn't get far. He shot her as well in the head. Dale, the father, was in a different car, but not too far behind him. So Joel laid in wait until the father entered the house. After killing Dale upon entrance, he thought he picked up all his shells but forgot one. And that was the shell that led him to get caught. Dana and Joel were arrested on March 2nd, 1995. They both escaped the death penalty. I don't know how. They got life in prison without the possibility of parole. So you did all this. Killed your mama, your daddy, and your sister. You didn't get your trust. Now you're spending your entire life in jail. Money is truly the root to all evil.
Madeline celebrated her 13th birthday on Sunday. On Monday, she was reported missing. 2 days later, her mother's boyfriend was arrested and later charged with 60 charges related to Madeline's case. 3 days later, her body was found. This story serves as another horrific reminder that you should never trust a man that you don't really know around your children. That being said, today's story does involve the child, a 13-year-old girl. If you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, please skip this video and I will see you in my next one. I mean it. Take care of yourselves. I love you. When I was researching for this case, I was like, this sounds an awful lot alike like a story that I've told before. I had to look back and see if I've already done this, and I hadn't. It's a different one, but how sad is that there are so many stories like this? It's unbelievable. Madeline Soto, a 13-year-old girl, lived with her mother, Jennifer Soto, and her mother's boyfriend, Stephen Stearns, in Florida. On February 26 of 2024, Madeline's mother, Jennifer, went to go pick up Madeline from school around 4:40 p.m., but she wasn't there. In fact, her mother was told that Madeline did not make it to school at all that day. Later, when her mother was asked if Madeline had a tendency to run away, her mom said that she wouldn't be the type to do that, and even so, on the off chance that she did leave on her own accord that day, she left her phone at home. She would not run away, period, but especially without a phone. The mother's boyfriend, Stephen, claimed that he drove Madeline to school that morning, but he didn't drop her off at school. He dropped her off in a church parking lot that was directly across from the school. So both him and Jennifer start to wonder if someone could have taken Madeline while she was crossing the street to go to school. After calling around and learning that none of her friends had heard from her that day, her mom called 911 at 8 p.m. to officially report Madeline Soto missing. The search for Madeline began immediately. Investigators understanding that this was a child, they had to act fast. The Orange County Sheriff's Department issued a release to the public in regards to Madeline's disappearance, asking for information about her whereabouts or anything at all really that may help lead them to Madeline. Officers, detectives, K9 dogs searched on foot, on horses, on helicopters. It was a massive search that included over 100 people. Madeline's friends were questioned, the mother was questioned, the mother's boyfriend was questioned, and Madeline's phone was also taken in as evidence. And in search of the phone, investigators found messages of Madeline telling, I assume her friends, that when she turned 13 years old, she wanted to go live in the woods. And remember, she disappeared just after her 13th birthday, so that is important to know. Way more concerning, however, is what was found on the mom's boyfriend's phone, Stephen Stearns. On his phone, investigators found explicit, vile, and because of that, on February 28th, 2024, he was arrested on charges of sexual battery and possession of CP. And get this, the disgusting, disturbing, truly vile content that was found on his phone showed children items clothing that matched those items found inside the house. Meaning he took that content himself inside the house, which makes me sick to my stomach. There are descriptions of what was found on his phone online. I'm literally not going to read them because it makes me want to throw up. But whatever you're thinking, I promise you, it's worse. Times it by 100. Whatever the worst image is in your mind, times it by 100. That kind of content found on his phone, along with signs that Stephen attempted to wipe his phone, the fact that he was the last person to allegedly be with Madeline, and suspicions of his story not being as solid as he claimed, all of those things combined led investigators to name Stephen Stearns as the primary suspect for the disappearance of 13-year-old Madeline Soto. Only 5 days after Madeline disappeared, the Orange County Sheriff's Office held yet another press conference. In that, they informed the public that it was their belief that Madeline Soto was no longer alive. They claimed that Stephen never dropped her off at school that morning, and they believed that because they believed that she was already deceased by that time of the morning. They flat out stated that they were no longer looking for her alive. Now they were just trying to recover a body. And how did they come to that conclusion? Well, let's go back to what was found on Stephen's phone that painted him in a pretty bad light. The disturbing content that was taken inside of that house. An affidavit showed Stephen told detectives that he, quote, accidentally performed a factory reset on his phone on February 26th. Coincidentally, the same exact day that Madeline went missing. Investigators also found video footage showing Stephen throwing items into a dumpster at their apartment complex around 7:35 in the morning that Madeline went missing. We later find out the items that he disposed of were Madeline's belongings, her backpack, and her school laptop. They also found video footage of Stephen's car driving around the area of Madeline's school the morning of, but never actually dropping her off. On top of that, when questioned further, investigators learned about their sleeping arrangements. The three of them, Madeline, her mother, and Stephen, all shared a bed. Stephen claiming that this was because Madeline needed human contact to be able to fall asleep. And after questioning an ex-girlfriend of his from years ago, they also find out that even when Stephen was in a relationship with someone else, he told that girlfriend that he still needed to sleep at the house in the same bed as Jennifer and Madeline because they couldn't fall asleep without him. That girlfriend thought that it was the strangest thing in the world because it is, and she ended up breaking things off with him. We also later find out that Madeline's own mother confirmed that she couldn't even remember the amount of times that she let Madeline and Stephen sleep in the same room together alone. She said that that was okay because she trusted Stephen. So an excessive amount, to say the least, of disturbing behavior coming from this guy. And it was authorities' belief that Stephen Stearns ended the life of Madeline Soto in their house and then got rid of the body and dumped it somewhere. And keep in mind, they have not found a body yet, but they are so certain that this is the case that they pretty much told the public to stop looking for her alive and start looking for a body. In fact, they were so certain that they told the public that when his vehicle was seen driving around the school around 8:19 a.m. that Monday morning, Madeline was visible. She was seen in that car, but they announced that they believed that when she was seen, she was already no longer alive. And shortly after that press conference, 13-year-old Madeline Soto's body was found. She was found in a wooded area off Hickory Tree Road, around that same exact area where Stephen's car had been stopped previously because allegedly he had a flat tire and made a stop there. The police chief made the following announcement, quote, "It is with a heavy heart I informed everyone that as we suspected, Madeline Soto is deceased. I am thankful that she was found and for the coordinated efforts of the Kissimmee Police Department, St. Cloud Police Department, Orange County Sheriff's Office and the Osceola County Sheriff's Office that we are able to bring some closure to the family. This is a sad day for our community and we mourn the loss of such a young life, end quote. The medical examiner's office announced that the autopsy report could not be released due to the state statutes deeming it confidential. However, we do know that her cause of death was ruled as a homicide by strangulation. After Madeline's body was found, investigators conducted yet another interview with her mother. In that interview, an investigator has said, quote, I asked her what she thought Stefan was guilty of, and she replied, quote, he's been grooming and my child, end quote. And released court records confirmed that, showing that Stefan is being accused of S-ing Madeline for years. Even though he attempted to wipe his phone, investigators were able to recover files showing the SA, which stemmed back as far as 2022. On March 12th, Stefan was charged with 60 charges against him, including SA of a child under the age of 12. On April 24th, the police announced that Stefan Stearns was also indicted on a first-degree murder charge by a grand jury in the death of Madeline Soto. The police chief stated, quote, the evidence shows an individual who was entrusted to keep Madeline safe made calculated moves to dispose of Madeline's belongings and place her body in a wooded area before she was ever reported missing, end quote. And on June 10th, the state attorney's office announced that prosecutors will be seeking the death penalty. The latest update that I could find was that the trial for the battery case was scheduled on February 24th of 2025, but I believe that has been delayed a few months and the homicide case was set for September 22nd of 2025. Lastly, a detective described the investigation as very intricate and said detectives want to make sure they, quote, uncover every single fact and the evidence. They stated, quote, we don't want to put a timeline on it, basically, because the detectives are very meticulous in what they do and we want to make sure that everything is uncovered that possibly can be, end quote. Yeah, disgusting. What is up with these men having sick fantasies for little girls and then ending their life? Like, what are you doing? It is beyond me. All I'm saying is that he better be getting the maximum sentence. Anyway, that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to Madeline's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. It's sunny here today, so I'm in a good mood. If you're not, go do something to make it the best day. Get yourself a little treat, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. Oh, also want to say, if you want to request a case, message me on Instagram because it's more likely that I will see my Instagram messages versus my TikTok messages. But yeah, love you, bye.
I really didn't want to make this video. Please be warned that if something upsets me this much, it is horrific. He was angry that his benefits were cut off, so he murdered a child. It was September 2022 in County Durham. Maya Chappell was just 2.5 years old. And honestly, watching the little videos of Maya, she's so adorable. She's so full of life. She's got this really infectious little laugh. He loved Peppa Pig and cake, and I'm like, I feel you, girl. She got just such a big, gorgeous personality for such a tiny little baby. Now, Maya's mum was Dana Carr, and her dad, her biological dad, was James Chappell. Now, sadly, the relationship between the two of them didn't last, and in summer 2022, Dana met a new guy, Michael Damond. And Michael was trusted to just look after her, in inverted commas, while Dana was at work. Which, please don't. If you're in a new relationship, unless you really know this person inside and out and you've been dating them for a long time, you know exactly what they're about, please just don't ever leave them alone with your child, especially when the child is so young. They can't advocate for themselves. They can't speak up. They don't know what's right and wrong. Very quickly after Michael was left in charge of this little baby, she started getting marks and injuries all over her body. Very quickly, Maya's family were incredibly concerned about this. They were voicing their concerns straight away, actually. And they were saying to Dana, what the hell is going on here? Why is she covered in bruises? She had marks on her cheek. She had bruises on her ears. You know, little toddlers do have a habit of walking into things or just being clumsy, but honestly, this was nothing any of them had ever seen before. Dana would always have an excuse to the relatives. She'd be like, oh yeah, she just bumped into a door, or she did it to herself, she accidentally pinched herself, and things like this. So she always had an excuse. But the bruising around her face looked like finger marks. This wasn't your average, oh, I've just bumped into something on a playground. And God, this absolutely sickens me to think about, but on the 5th of September, Michael actually rang Dana at work and was like, "Oh, I had to grab Maya to stop her from choking." And this was a sick attempt to excuse the fact that this little angel had a cut nose and a burst lip. And Dana's stepdad actually spoke up at one point. He was like, "What the hell is going on here?" He was actually bathing Maya at one point, and he noticed her little body was just covered in bruises and marks. He said to Dana, "You need to take her to the GP because this is not normal." But Dana continued to lie and say that little Maya was doing this to herself. At one point, Dana even tried to blame Maya's biological nan for no reason other than to literally just take the heat off her own boyfriend. Maya's bruises just got worse and worse and more, and even though Maya started a couple of days at nursery and really enjoyed it, bless her, Dana actually took her out of nursery, and I'm presuming that's because nursery would have noticed. And it breaks my heart because Maya, by the sounds of things, was really loving those nursery sessions. And Dana would actually stop Maya's biological dad from seeing her a couple of times. She was making up excuses like she was too poorly. Meanwhile, she was perfectly happy for Michael to look after her. It was all getting really, really bad, and Maya's poor family were trying to speak up about this. They were trying to do anything they could to advocate for little Maya. They were taking photos of these bruises as proof. They were desperately trying to say to Dana, like, "Look, what the hell's going on here?" She would always come up with an excuse. Oh, she hit her head off a cabinet, or she pinched herself on purpose. And one person had even noticed that little Maya seemed scared of Michael, but Dana was turning a blind eye. It was so sickening. On the 28th of September, Michael was once again allowed to be left alone with Maya. And he was in a foul mood this day. He was being chased by people for substance money. He'd run up a lot of debts with substance dealers. And on the same day, he had a call to say that his benefits were being cut off. At 3:30 that afternoon, Michael got an aggressive message about his substance debt. And 5 minutes later, he rang Dana at work to say that Maya had collapsed. Emergency services obviously raced to the scene, with this being a little 2.5-year-old, and they did absolutely everything that they could to try and save Maya, but tragically they were not able to. She was found to have suffered severe unsurvivable brain trauma, having been violently shaken, and evidence showed she was likely to have also been kicked. Michael and Dana were obviously arrested. He denied being responsible for this sickening murder, but thankfully he was given life with a minimum of 20 years and also an extra 6 years for child cruelty. Dana, the mum who allowed all of this to happen, showed zero remorse and was jailed for just 9 years and did thankfully lose her appeal. Now, Maya's family were absolutely desperate for any signatures on their petition. They have put together a petition to change safeguarding regulations, so please, if you've got a couple of minutes, please just pop your signature on there. It would mean the world to them.